Hello, this week I want to talk about how you can save your own life. Welcome to the MindFuckery Podcast, which is FeedSpot's fifth must-listen to podcast on emotional abuse. I'm your host Elizabeth, and in here we explore areas others are feared to tread. Through my own personal journey, I know how much this hurts and how confusing life becomes. So many questions, no closure and no real answers. I've been a woundologist for over 20 years. I'm the unintentional author of Finding Lily, the A to Z of emotional abuse and divorce matters. I help you clear past life wounds, ancestral trauma, and this life wounding. And as the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary, I've created Wound Talking, the original wound, and Quantum Glow. I'm on a mission to help educate as many people as I can on the effects of trauma on our lives and our children's lives, and healing the wounds of our mothers and our fathers. It stops here, it stops now, it stops with us. So welcome along for the journey of a lifetime. And as ever, you are so very welcome. This week I want to talk about saving your own life and divorcing emotionally, breaking free from emotionally abusive relationships, and understanding the impact that it has on your life, on your body, on your mind, spiritually, on every area of your life. Have you heard of the song How to Save a Life by The Fray? I went and looked at the lyrics because I do love a song, and I often think that there's something in there. There's a message in some lyrics. So the song was released in 2005 and it was part of the Fray's debut album. And according to some of the blurb, at its core, How to Save a Life deals with the heavy themes of loss, regret, and the inability to intervene in a life spiraling out of control. And the person that wrote it, one of the band members, I actually don't know much about the Fray, drew inspiration from being a mentor at a camp of troubled teens where he met a young guy who he failed to connect with. But it was something that I was looking at, talking about today, and that song popped in my head, as often they do when it hasn't happened for a while, but I usually wake up with songs in my head and then sort of unpick what that means. It usually results in a podcast or maybe a YouTube video. I wanted to talk about the loss, the regret, divorcing emotionally, and that isn't actually divorce, that is that disconnection. Because with these relationships, we invest time and money and energy and everything, and we get what we think initially is a response. We get what we think is a connection, what we think is a mirroring, or we're love bombed. You're love bombed into believing that what you're feeling is reciprocated. Unfortunately, the abuse is so subtle, it goes unnoticed. You are seen and heard in a way perhaps you've never been seen and heard before. Takes you into a different place with a connection, and this connection can be with yourself for a period of time until the abuse starts, and the confusion and the wondering and the things not making sense. And I don't mean just affairs or lies, I mean the feelings in the body, the cognitive dissonance where what you're told doesn't marry up with what you believe is the truth. Your morals are telling you one thing and you're fighting against what they're telling you. It might be that the people that are surrounding you are being challenged in a way, or you're being asked to challenge your thoughts around these people. And this is this projection. You're being undermined. You're being asked to question everything. This is where my spirituality thing comes in. So I believe we're attacked on 5 levels, which is emotionally and mentally, spiritually, financially, and physically. And spiritually isn't about your spiritual beliefs, it's about everything. And in that area comes your morals, the things that you hold true, things that are important to you. And in this area, the boundaries will be pushed. Well, they're pushed in every area, but the boundaries will be pushed. They will get you to question your beliefs. And when you forgive them once, for something, they know that your boundary has been moved slightly, and they go for that again until the boundary's gone, it's broken, it's whether it's a fence or however you visualize that, it's been destroyed. Let's say it was a white picket fence as a boundary, marking out your area. This area is important to me, and you're moving in, and your area that you're living in is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And actually that's a really good way of looking at it, because this is what happens with your life. The people around you get further away, you're isolated, but the area that you've got that belongs to you, if you look at it as your house and your white picket fence around your house that's protecting you, that is getting smaller, it's shrinking in. This abuse is chronic. It goes on every day. You might not notice it because it's interspersed and you get used to it. It's like the stain on the carpet, but it creates physical problems. It creates depression or anxiety. You might experience headaches. You might have digestive issues. Inflammation creates autoimmune disorders. Trauma is responsible. And much like breaking a bone or tearing a muscle or a ligament, emotional abuse creates trauma within the body. It's stored and it later comes up and creates physical illnesses within you. It creates stress-related disorders. You're going from an environment where you're feeling seen and heard and loved, whether that's true or not, to being abused and not understanding how you get from one moment to the next moment. And then there's a gaslighting where they tell you that you're too sensitive, or they didn't say that, or they outright lie and try to convince you that this is your fault, that if you hadn't behaved in a certain way, they wouldn't have done what they were doing. Some people experience weight gain, other people lose weight. You live in a state of fight or flight, on alert all the time. These are your stress responses. Now, stress is actually good for us. It keeps us connected. Where it's bad is where it's continuous, where there isn't a break, where you don't get a chance to down tools, so to speak, where there isn't time to relax. When those stress hormones are being fired constantly. So when you're in a stressful environment, say at work, you've got a project that has got a deadline and you've been working on it, you can see the clock, it has to be in by 5 o'clock and it's now 3 and you're trying to pull it all together and there's little bits of information that are missing. That stress is okay. It keeps us fired up, keeps us going. It keeps that momentum in us to get everything ready and prepared to submit that project at 5 o'clock. Where it's bad is that you're living in that environment, you're waking up in that environment, you're eating in that environment, you're going to sleep in that environment. Your body doesn't get time to relax. You hand in the project or the proposal that you have been putting together and working on for weeks or months or a few days, and you sigh with relief. Wow, that's done. Your body then has a chance to repair and relax. So that type of stress is good. When you are living in that environment and it's continuous, that is where stress is bad. We are constantly fighting for survival. You are living or walking on eggshells all the time, and you are aware of every situation, every angle that you can see, because you are hyper alert. You can sense the change in atmosphere. My own experience was freeze a few times when I was in the relationship. Most horrific thing, or one of the most horrific things that I'd experienced. But even out of the relationship, I had adrenal fatigue, mental confusion. I was having nightmares where I was waking up and then going into freeze. I was having panic attacks, and there were points where I would have done anything to get back in that relationship, not to experience what I was experiencing. I was living in fear. I did not know what the future held. I knew that relationship wasn't healthy. I knew it wasn't safe, but in those moments, it was far safer. You can heal from narcissistic and emotional abuse. It is possible. These aren't life sentences, but it does mean that you need to go and do some work. Healing from emotional and narcissistic abuse is possible and transformational, because the way I work, we work with the deep wounds. I don't talk about it. I don't get you to relive the trauma because there's no point in that. It's triggering. I don't go over things constantly because you're literally gaslighting yourself and you are re-triggering on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is basis. I do believe that talking therapies can be helpful, but I also believe that they keep you trapped. If you're not working directly on healing the wounds and where it comes from. Divorcing emotionally means that you no longer have feelings. You no longer are triggered. You've broken the trauma bond. You can see the difference between the person you thought they were and the person that they are. And fully divorcing emotionally means you have no feelings. You don't even look at them and go, oh my God, what did I see in you? Healing from emotional abuse, it's life-changing. It isn't going off and saying, look at me, I'm living my best life. It's just living. It's living without looking over your shoulder. It's living without a feeling that's knotted in your gut. It's living the life that you were born to live. Fear keeps us trapped. Survival keeps us trapped. Trauma keeps us trapped. I was out yesterday and I was talking to a friend and she said to me, when we first met, you were telling me about this. I talk about ancestral trauma because it gets passed from our parents, from their parents, from their parents. And we are able to break free from these ties and chains and this trauma. And we're able to heal, not just for ourselves, but for our children. And we're able to heal for our ancestors as well. We're born into a family unit who have ideas and beliefs. And we're molded and we stay safe in that family unit by keeping or staying within those parameters, but that might not fit. It's like wearing a wetsuit that's 3 or 4 sizes too small. It's restrictive, but our need for survival and be connected to people sometimes outweighs. And if you're in an environment where we do it this way, it's this way or the highway. The highway to us is death, and the highway to our ancestors who weren't protected by a tribe would be death. But it isn't in our society now. Stepping out and healing those wounds changes everything for the generations to come, for future generations. The way that we parent our children changes the future of our children. By realizing that some of the trauma that might have led some of the parenting that you received, you can start to change things, not just for yourself, but also for the future generations. And the work that I do, I help you reparent yourself. So if you didn't have a childhood where you were supported, you become that parent and you support yourself. You parent yourself. You give yourself what you needed at the time. And you see and hear yourself, because let's be honest, we really are the only ones who know what we need. So divorcing emotionally is key, healing those wounds. And you can start when you're in those moments, perhaps you, like me, experiencing panic attacks, or you can't sleep, or you're having nightmares. I mean, these weren't just nightmares. It was very real. Felt like I was being held down in bed, strangled. They were awful experiences. You can ground and you can breathe, and that will help you with cognitive dissonance, where you're fighting the memories of how good it could be in moments and was for certain periods of time. But really all that was a mask. They were an actor. They were wearing a mask and playing a role. When you start to see them for the damaged child that they are, and you don't feel sorry for them and want to protect them and want to heal them, that's when you know that you're starting to heal. That's when you know that you're breaking that trauma bond. That's when you know when you're starting to divorce emotionally. Because if anybody else came up to you and spoke to you in a certain way or treated you in a certain way, you'd probably walk away or not have anything to do with them. But they present this damaged inner child to you. You recognize it in some form. You recognize their wounds on some level, and you wanted to protect them. You wanted to heal them. And it might have been for some that it was a parent that they couldn't protect, a parent that played victim. and they weren't able to save that parent. And now this person turns up in their life and they feel like they've been given that opportunity. The words and actions that they use and will continue to use throughout that relationship, even after you're not together, they will continue to try and play with your emotions to get a reaction. Negative or positive, they don't really care. So the key is divorcing emotionally, working on yourself, building back those boundaries that have been broken down, relaying out the blueprint, resetting those boundaries, maybe even making them bigger and stronger and deeper. All they want is attention. They don't care whether it's a good reaction or a bad reaction. If they still see you upset and crying and wanting to be back in that relationship, they know they've still got control over you. So as I said, it causes a lot of damage on every level, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and financially. But you can transform your life, and just some simple steps at the beginning when you're spiraling out emotionally are breathing and grounding. I'll put some links in the description of some videos that you can use that might help you. I hope this week's been helpful, and as always, I'm sending you loads and loads of love.